Hello and welcome to Just Us 3 Episode 7. Today we'll be discussing women in journalism. However, this week we're excited to welcome our special guest, Hannah van der Peer. How are you all?
Good, thank you.
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. We're so excited to finally have a guest on this podcast, and what a guest to start with. We're so excited to have you on, Hannah.
Oh, thank you so much. It's really nice to be here.
How are you finding it with lockdown, Hannah? You know, it must be interesting being a freelance journalist trying to navigate the new world, as it were.
Oh my God, it's just work 24/7. Literally, I mean, I did work in retail just before Christmas. Obviously, I'm not doing that now. But it is really hard. Like, I've just been. It feels like working from home. It feels like you're just kind of living at work. Like there's no work-life balance.
Yeah, it was so difficult to separate out like your workspace and your relaxation space. I know we're struggling a bit because obviously we're university students, and it just seems like there's no escape from it at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Like yesterday I had a shift at the breakdown and I literally worked from my bed, and I'm not sure whether that was the best idea or not, but
Oh no, we've been doing that a lot with 9 a.m. lectures. So sometimes you do think, is this what I should be doing? But sometimes it just feels like the best thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Just like get some tea and toast and you're set.
Yeah,
sorted.
Well, now they're getting us to switch our cameras on the lectures. I don't think we'll have an excuse to be in bed anymore. That was a change. So Hannah, we just wondered, how did you break into the industry, and can you talk us through the work that you've done or the work that you're currently doing?
So I guess my story is quite unusual in the sense that I started off blogging. I kind of had it in my mind that I wanted to be a journalist from the age of about 16. But that was mostly because I was encouraged by my sixth form teachers. So I kind of had a bit of an unconventional way of trying to get work at that age. I kind of realised that I wanted to be a journalist. I didn't have the first clue about like pitching or anything like that, and I kind of just wrote to my favourite publications being like, do you guys have any vacancies? I'm available if you need me. But then kind of as I got a bit older, I kind of realised that I didn't really have a natural foot in the door, because I didn't really have any connections or anything like that. So I kind of thought, I guess blogging would be the best way to kind of build up a portfolio and show people what I can do in terms of my writing. And it was this one piece that I wrote about my journey with vaginismus that kind of, this was for my blog, and it completely blew up. And I never expected to get the reaction that I did. And it was from there that I had an interview with BBC News, and then from that I got my first commission with Huffington Post, and since then I've just never looked back.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, really good.
Wow. So what work are you doing at the moment since you've first got commissioned for Huffington Post? When was that, and what have you done since that point?
Gosh, so that was July 2019. I was in my second year of uni, and that kind of gave me the confidence, I guess, to learn how to pitch, because I think the email that I sent to HuffPost when I got picked up for their for my personal piece, I basically sent them like the whole essay, which is such a big no-no in journalism, obviously. And so since then I kind of tried to hone my craft a little bit more. In my final year of uni, I wrote a piece for The Guardian and for Metro as well. And then 2020, I kind of had a really dry year. I think I wrote one piece for Metro throughout like the whole, I think it was like 9 months I went without a commission. And then right at the end of December, I started freelancing for I don't know whether you've heard of it, the mental health publication, The Breakdown.
Yeah. I love that magazine so much.
Oh, I'm so glad, because I got taken on as a freelancer, and then Hattie, my editor, said we basically love your writing so much that we want to keep you on as permanent staff. which is just a dream come true. And so now I'm doing shifts for the Breakdown every week, and I'm still trying to get those commissions.
I love that. I love that you've gone from like just doing a blog post to getting to where you are. That's such a like great sense of growth, I guess.
Yeah. I love that as well, because I relate to that so much, because the way I started out, I had a blog as well. And although blogging's such an amazing thing, it's so sad when you have to kind of leave it behind, because you move on to bigger things eventually. And obviously you want to start getting your writing out there for publications, but it's just so sad that that's where we started out, and you kind of have to leave that behind.
And a blog is such a personal thing as well. Like I feel like because I write personal, I'm quite used to writing personal and first person pieces for like national publications and things like that. But I feel like with a blog, it's just an entirely different ball game. Like it is really personal. There's no editing that goes on. It's just like you, but at your most authentic. And I think that's part of the reason why it's so sad leaving it behind, because it does feel like you're leaving behind a little part of you.
What do you believe is the most difficult part, being a woman in an industry which is definitely male dominated, especially with the freelance? How do you, feel about that, and what are your struggles been?
I don't, okay. I do have a criticism, because I know I just said that I write a lot of personal pieces, but one of my main criticisms about the industry in general is that I feel like women and marginalized genders, and kind of just marginalized people in general who aren't men, essentially, I feel like we feel like the only way that we can get into the industry is by kind of exposing a lot of our trauma and a lot of our soul, and exploiting that for, I mean, some might call it exploiting, some might call it something else, but it does feel quite exploitative when you feel like the only way to get your foot in the door is by kind of writing all of these really personal pieces, especially when there are certain kind of hot topics that editors want you to write about and kind of explore that side of you. But if you live through it, it's not like a trend, it's your life. And I think that part of it is really hard. And I think that I've really struggled with writing all of these personal pieces, and then having an editor say, I won't name any names, and it's no one I've worked with recently, but having an editor say, oh, could you just kind of make that bit a little bit more hard hitting, or could you just say a little bit more about this, when it's a struggle.
And as 3 female aspiring journalists, what advice would you give to us going into that industry where there is such a difference between genders?
I would say, there's a saying, isn't there, about having the confidence of an average cis white male? And I would say it does ring true. You need to really have faith in your source, like be confident, because you are good and your ideas are really good. And yeah, the competition is tough in freelance journalism, but as long as you keep that faith and that confidence, you're going to be fine. And like, it's also said that editors, there is a lot of rejection that goes on in freelance journalism, but they're rejecting an idea, they're not rejecting you or your talents as a writer. So I would say to just keep going. And if your niche is something very specific, like opinion or lifestyle writing, like me, I would say to keep pushing that and to not give that up, because I think a lot of us feel like we kind of have to, because I started out writing opinion-based and pitching opinion-based articles, but in the end I felt like I had to drop that because more of my personal stuff was getting picked up. And so I would say that was definitely like my main regret. You should definitely just like find your niche and just push it and stick with it, because you will get those commissions in the end.
I mean, for us personally, we love Journo Twister so much, but obviously there is the downside to it, in the fact that it can be very hard to not compare yourself to others, and it does incite a lot of self-comparison. So we just wondered, like, do you struggle with imposter syndrome, or do you find that journo Twitter like really helps you on a day-to-day basis, and what you have experienced?
I think it really depends, because I do suffer from imposter syndrome massively. I mean, I have a story. I don't know whether it's okay for me to tell it, but I did some work experience at, I won't say where it was, but it was a huge news corporation, back in my third year of uni, I think it was. And I remember going down to this like media cafe to meet with someone quite high up. And I just remember being there, and it was just me, like 20-year-old me in my like jeans, and the whole cafe was just filled with men in suits. And that was when imposter syndrome hit me the hardest, because I was just like, I don't feel like I belong here. This is insane. In terms of journo Twitter, like I say, I think it depends on a day-to-day basis, because I do have days and kind of periods of time where I feel less confident. And to see all of your contemporaries and your peers getting a ton of dream commission, what seems like a ton of dream commissions, obviously Twitter is a highlight reel, that can be really hard. But on the other side, when you're feeling more confident about yourself and more in the right headspace to support your friends and you know, it can be a really lovely place, and it can be really supportive as well.
So we've seen that you've got quite a supportive group of friends on like social media. So we just wondered like how you can be more confident to reach out and connect with other young journalists, because obviously we're on a journalism course, so it's been very easy for us to connect with other like-minded young journalists. But obviously if we wanted to reach out to others, how would you like encourage us to be more confident to do that, and what advice would you give us?
I would say that when I reached out to find other kind of friends in the freelance journo scene, it came from a place of not being very confident and having too much self-comparison. And I kind of just, one day I just thought, you know, I don't really know these people, and I don't know how they're struggling to obtain commissions. I mean, they could be struggling as much as I am. So that's when I kind of made the effort to say, okay, I'm going to try and get to know these people, and I want to create a positive space where not only can we share ideas with each other and be open about that and the process and the journey, but also I want it to be a space where we can vent about the negative side of journalism and our struggles and what's getting us down. And so I think that just putting yourself out there has to be the best advice that I have, because it worked for me, you know.
Yeah, I think that's such a great bit of advice. But do you think, you know, social media for young journalists like us and in start journalists, do you think it's really important for young journalists? Like I know you've done the brainstorm babes, and you've pioneered that friendship group. Do you think social media is kind of that like be all end all, or do you think that there's other ways that you can connect with people too?
I think I'm sure there are other ways of connecting. It's just that when you're, especially in these turbulent times, when you're kind of just working from home all the time and you can't really get out there and have, you know, real life meetings with people, social media has been really helpful for me to be able to connect with other people when, you know, loneliness is such a huge thing. And I think I've spoken about it with the people in my group, and we're all on the same page that when you're working from home anyway, despite lockdown, it can be a really lonely place.
Yeah. So do you feel like that, you know, the social media is giving you that kind of connection really in a time where we're all just on our laptops at home, and say that it's giving you that company, is that the right word? You know, that kind of confidence to have the company and making new friends and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've got my my brainstorm babes on our WhatsApp group chat, and that group chat is just buzzing. Like I will leave my phone for 5 minutes, pick it up, and I've got 200 notifications, and that's not an exaggeration, you know.
Wow.
And so I would say, yeah, definitely. I think social media it can provide good company for all its faults.
Yeah, that's great. And it's great that you've set up that, you know, the group as well, and that everyone's kind of finding a community. And I think that's such a great idea, especially right now.
Yeah, definitely. And something that's quite interesting is that, I mean, we've all got our own specific sort of interest areas. So I know like Katie's really into fashion writing, Olivia's really into social media, and I'm really into music. And we just sort of wondered when you decided, or what made you want to start writing about sex and relationships. Was there any sort of trigger that you wanted, like that made you start writing about them, or was there anything that inspired you or anything like that?
Well, when I was doing my blog, I did dabble with sex and relationships. It felt like, so this was kind of a different time, and I used to call it women's issues. You know, we used to cover women's issues. Like, obviously I wouldn't say that now, but at the time it was like beauty and fashion, and a little bit of sex and relationships, and a little bit of health, and you know. And I remember writing a piece right at the beginning, back in 2018, on being on the pill and my experience with the pill. And you know, my blog was tiny back then, and I didn't have much of a reaction, but to write about it felt really liberating. And I did think to myself, next time I want to write about something like this, I am going to be a little bit braver, and I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable with kind of sharing that side of me. But it wasn't until I decided to open up about my journey with vaginismus that I realized what I'm writing about can really resonate with people. And I used to say that I was in the business of breaking taboos. And I still feel like that today. Not every single piece that I write is going to be impactful, but that was when I realized that I wanted to do something a little bit more sex positive. And once I shared that blog post on vaginismus and it got the response that it did, I realized that I wanted to write more about that kind of thing rather than just like having sex and dating. I wanted to write about the unexplored areas of those subjects, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's really important that people do write about it, because you know it's also educational, isn't it?
Although it's spoken about more openly now, you still don't see many young journalists speaking about sex openly, and relationships and dating I believe is quite a new topic that's widely spoken about. But we see you, Hannah, as one of the main journalists who promote sex positivity for all, and we wanted to know how it makes you feel knowing that you're helping to reduce the stigma around these topics, because you really are making such a big difference for like people like us who read your work.
That's so lovely. That's really nice to hear. Yeah, I mean, it feels good. I don't always, like I say, it does conflict with the imposter syndrome a lot, and I don't often feel like what I'm doing is making a difference. But it is really good to hear that, and it's, you know, it's what I do. Like it's what I started off doing. Like I have my bread and butter is writing about taboo subjects, and I've even like campaigned to get vaginismus included onto the sex education curriculum as well. And it, you know, it used to be quite hard writing about subjects that have a lot of stigma attached to it, but now I'm completely floored by what you said. It's so nice.
That's the truth, honestly. Like, we were so excited to have you on this podcast, especially as our first guest. We were so excited. Also, as well, we loved your recent article for the breakdown on the news about Zoella being removed from the syllabus. And I also wrote a piece on this. It was more generally about sex education rather than Zoella. But as somebody who's written a piece on this, I usually push a lot of my work out on Twitter. And usually I do it without even batting an eyelid. But with this piece, you know, when you feel kind of a sense of like, you don't know how it'll be received by people and whether or not you'll get judged. And I was just wondering how you put out your pieces about these topics without feeling like you'll be judged, because obviously, like, my niche is fashion sustainability. So for me to dabble in things like sex writing and other topics, I don't think people would expect it of me. So I was just wondering how to overcome the fear of being judged for your work.
That is really hard because there's always going to be judgment, essentially, it's a really hard pill to swallow when you're just getting into journalism and you're sharing these opinions and this side of yourself that is quite vulnerable. But I also think that social media, I mean, I'm lucky enough that I've never been kind of inundated or overwhelmed with negative comments. I think I've done pieces where the comments on the actual articles have been quite bad. I did write, I think it was about a year ago now, or maybe not that far away, but I wrote an article about like barely legal fetishization. And that was a really controversial one because I knew that was going to be unpopular with a certain demographic. And it was, and I had a lot of really horrible comments that I wouldn't care to repeat. But it has to just kind of roll off your back, because if it doesn't, you're in the wrong business. You know, journalism is there to be criticized, unfortunately. But I think the best advice that I could give is to always look for the support, because there are going to be people who agree with you and who wholeheartedly support you. And if you can reach out and kind of help one person with the content that you put out there, it's all worth it, definitely.
That sounds really good. I know you've mentioned about like helping people. What about, you know, obviously with the Zoella topic and sex education and the system and how it all needs changing, what are your opinions on that? You know, why do you think it's important for young people to be so open about, you know, female masturbation isn't spoken about at all? Like, I remember, you know, Kay's only 19 and we're 20, and we've never been taught it, and it's only now that women are now speaking about that. So why do you think that's important for schools to change the, you know, because you learn about guys masturbating and like wet dreams and everything like that, but you don't learn about girls and what girls experience. So why do you think that's important?
My experience of sex education was more or less the same. It is very penis focused. I would say that, I mean, I hate to keep coming back to this, but my experience with vaginismus, I always felt like I was cheated out of a good sex education. But it didn't kind of come to fruition until I was diagnosed with vaginismus, because there is no other reason why I was suffering with that, other than the fact that I just felt like penetrative sex was shameful and that it was supposed to hurt, because that's what I was taught. And I kind of came into that situation with so many expectations about like, oh my God, like if sex is supposed to be a good thing, why am I expecting it to hurt so much? And it's the fact that it had so much of an impact on me personally, that it caused an actual disorder, that's insane to me. Like that, I'm still speechless, because that was just caused by social stigma. That was nothing else, you know. And so I think that it's in the interests of our literal well-being, these things need to be taught and they need to be spoken about openly. And I know it's uncomfortable, but it just has to. And the more that we speak about it, the less uncomfortable it will become. And I feel like, thankfully, our generation are a lot less bound by the stigma than the previous generation, so our parents. I mean, I don't know what your experience was, but I think that definitely, like, as we're going along, it's going to get better, hopefully.
I think it's hard. Like I've seen your, I was looking you up before this, and I saw your video for the BBC on, is it Vaginismus?
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. And obviously, I hadn't heard of it before I watched the is it documentary? That's short video. But yeah, it was really interesting. Do you want to tell, obviously, anyone who's listening what that is a bit more? Because obviously, I didn't know what it was, and I found it really interesting.
Yeah, I did think about this. I was like, I'm talking about vaginismus. Do people know what this is? So vaginismus, it's they call it a psychosexual disorder. So it's like a little bit in the brain, a little bit physical. And what it is the pelvic floor muscles involuntarily contract when penetration is attempted. And that's not just strictly through sex. That can be, if you're undergoing a pap smear, or if you're trying to use a tampon or anything like that. And because the pelvic floor muscles are contracting, it makes penetration literally impossible. And it is so painful. It is really, really painful. And I think it's something like, I mean, don't quote me on this, because I need to fact check, but it's something like 2 in every 100 people have it. Wow. So it's literally like the most common disorder you've never heard of.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because again, I'm on the same page as Olivia. I had no idea what it was. It's mad that we were never taught that in school. I can't get my head around it.
It definitely reinforces that something needs to change.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned about your upbringing. Did you say that it was religious as well? Like, you had a religious background? I think I remember, like, listening to the video. Do you think that it was that affected, the mental side of things? That's why that kind of progressed. Do you think it's within society that needs to change? That makes sense.
So my background wasn't necessarily religious, but I did go to for the last couple of years, after we moved up to where we live now, I did go to a Church of England primary school. And I think that had, I think, quite a big impact on how they went around teaching us sex education, because I think it was definitely more abstinence focused rather than pleasure. I mean, to be honest, what sex education is pleasure focused nowadays? But I think it definitely impacted how they taught certain things, and the promotion of celibacy as well. It was kind of, and it was cheeky, because it was almost like a subliminal a subliminal message about celibacy, because it was all of this, like, you can go out and have sex if you want, but it is going to hurt, and it's not going to be as fun as you think it is. And I think that definitely because then when I moved up to secondary school, I mean, my sex education back then was non-existent. We didn't really have any kind of PSHE or anything like that, where we were really taught about it in any kind of social context. It was more kind of, we had biology lessons where we learned about fertilization, all of that process, but I mean, it was just non-existent.
Yeah, and the reason why I mentioned it is because I went to a religious school, and I had a similar background that I think in religious schools that they kind of dampen down sex and everything. Like, I had barely any sex education in comparison to everyone else that I've spoken to previously. So I do agree with you that it's definitely your background. So that's really interesting. Thanks for opening up about that as well.
It's interesting.
Yeah, no worries. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, it's interesting to hear about, like, your religious background, because I didn't go to a religious school. Like, neither my primary or secondary school were religious, but my sex education classes were still pretty non-existent. Like, I remember in year 5 we had a few classes that just taught you the bare minimum, and then you'd get thrown into secondary school and expect to know everything, and when really none of us had a clue. And then we had no classes in secondary school, and I think that's why it's so important that people like Zoella are discussed in like some of the syllabus as well, because it's not just about having sex education classes, it's being able to openly discuss sex in other subjects as well. To be removed from the media syllabus, I just think is absolutely crazy.
And something that I noticed as well, because like Katie, I didn't go to a religious school, something that I always found really like strange looking back or reflecting on what we were taught about sex education was they would never use like terms for body parts. So they'd say, so you have the cucumber, and then you put the like condom on the cucumber, and you just think, as a year 8 or a year 9 student, you just sat there absolutely clueless, thinking, what? Like, what do you mean? So I just thought that, you know, the teachers always seemed very awkward with it, which wouldn't have helped get the message across. But yeah, it does highlight that change definitely needs to happen in that area, I think. And on a side note, we were going to mention that we saw on your Twitter the other day that you said you'd received 4 commissions in January when your target for the year was getting 5. How did this make you feel, and has your target changed at all now moving forward?
I mean, it's amazing, obviously. Like I never expected to get 4 commissions in 1 month. That's never happened to me before. I actually, on the second working day back in January, I did receive 2 commissions in 1 day, and that's never happened to me before. So I was like, whoa. And one of them was a dream, obviously. It was Cosmopolitan, which for just for some like real life perspective, I've been pitching to the same editor at Cosmo for 2 years. And that was the first yes.
Wow.
So that was a dream come true. My target hasn't changed, because I think that once I get that 5th commission, I'm going to feel like it's difficult, because at the moment, I'm relying on freelancing to get by financially. So I'm not going to kind of say, okay, I've done 5, that's it now. But I am going to kind of tick off that target and move on and celebrate it, and not make another one for the rest of the year, because that's when you kind of get into a circle of self-comparison, I think. But no, it did feel really, really amazing, definitely. Yeah,
no, it's a brilliant achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's inspiring for, you know, young journos like us who every time we're looking at Cosmopolitan and thinking, damn, if I could write for that. But that's so inspiring.
All right, we'll get there eventually. So we also wanted to know, where do you see your career progressing? Do you plan on continuing with freelancing, or do you have any other plans? Where do you see yourself?
At the moment, I'm continuing with freelancing. I think I have it quite easy because I do live with my parents. So it's sustainable for now. But eventually, I mean, I think it is the dream of any journo to get that amazing staff job at your dream publication. But it is what I'm working towards, if I'm being honest. Like I to have a staff job at any publication would be amazing, just in terms of practicality and sustainability. But I would say, really, I just want to keep inspiring people with my words, and I want to get to a point where people know what they expect from me. Like I just want to keep producing high quality work in whatever situation that I'm in. And I you know, if we're talking about tangible things, in sort of 10 years time, I'd love to take home a British Journalist Award.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have no doubt you will.
Thank you.
What would you say to, you know, young journos who are like, you know, you've said that there was a month where you just, or like a year, you just got 1 commission. What would you say to them? Because obviously it's it's awful when you pitch something and then you get rejected. It's that you feel like it is, like you said, it's not you, it's just the idea. But what would you say to any young journos, or anyone, any journo that's starting out a career?
The thing is, I think it's so much easier said than done to kind of just say, don't take the rejections to heart because it's not you. And I know that I said that, but at the same time, like yesterday, I mean, this month I've received 7 rejections for 8 pictures, and one of them has been ghosted. So it's you know, it is really hard not to take it to heart. But I would say on to the next one, always on to the next one. Like, just keep pushing, because you know, you will land that commission. I mean, if anything, like the take home message is to keep pushing. I mean, if I had just stopped at 1 rejection from Cosmopolitan, I wouldn't have got the commission that I got last month, and I wouldn't have realized that dream. So definitely just keep pushing, keep pitching, keep putting your work out there, because eventually it will pay off.
Do you have any questions for us? I know we've been kind of interviewing you and asking you loads of questions on this on Saturday morning when you're giving us your morning. Is there anything that you'd like to ask us about, you know, being young journalists ourselves?
I mean, just how are you finding it? I mean, I would love to read any of your stuff if you could send me links afterwards, but how are you finding it? I mean, what did you say you were studying journalism at university as well?
Yeah, we're all at the University of Sheffield.
That's awesome.
We're all on the course. We all found each other, so that was really nice. But yeah, for me, I don't know about you two, but I think it's just getting used to being online. You know, like the transition of doing Zoom calls and not seeing people, and because before when we were doing like patchwork, we were doing like you were going to people, you were interviewing people, you were seeing people, and it's kind of navigating the new world, I guess. I think that's what I'm finding difficult, like the most difficult about it.
I think what I'm struggling with is balancing everything, because obviously university is a lot. We're just starting our second half of second year,
right.
And I'd love to be pitching constantly. Like, my goal for this year is to get my first paid commission, but doing that alongside university is hard. Like, I want to be doing it continuously, but there is just no way around it. So I think not being too hard on myself and giving myself a break. Like, we finished our exams a couple of weeks ago, so we've had a little bit of a break between like the new semester starting and the exams finishing, and it's hard to give yourself some time off when we know that we deserve it, but you just want to like move on to the next thing, and we're so hard on ourselves sometimes that I think the importance of giving ourselves a break, I think we need to realize that.
I was just going to say, I really struggled with that in second year as well, just in uni in general, because I would say that honestly, you don't need to be pitching constantly. There is a thing, I don't know whether you've ever heard of panic pitching. So it comes from this feeling of, oh my God, I need to be pitching all the time, and you kind of end up sending ideas that aren't really there yet, and kind of throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. I would say it's better to rely on like 1 or 2 really good ideas and get that out there, rather than just kind of like pitching constantly, because it takes the pressure off you as well.
Yeah, I think I've done that before. You mentioned that now. Being like, oh wait, that's been a bit panicked, but yeah, that's really good advice.
But yeah, I think going back to the question you had, I think, I don't know, for me it's a bit of both of what Olivia and Katie have said, but I think it's also, I don't know, it's trying to vary it up a bit, I think, because otherwise it's nice to just have that variation. So I think even by doing the podcast, you know, we record the episode and then it's editing, it's putting up the posts, you know, it's all a nice variation from writing, uni work, shorthand. I don't know if you've done shorthand, but yeah, I think I think it's important to just vary it up a lot, and I think that's definitely helped these last few weeks in the lockdown. But yeah, I think we're all definitely enjoying the course, and yeah, it's just trying to take stuff away from it that's going to be really valuable, I think. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great.
And thank you so much to everybody who is listening, who's made it this far. We appreciate your support so much. And as always, our social media links will be in the podcast description, and we'll also put links to Hannah's social media down there as well, so you can check out her work.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.